Hey guys, hope everyone's having a good weekday and looking forward to the coming weekend. Since you guys liked the deep dive that I did yesterday, a few days ago, I decided to do kind of a brand new type of thing in which I will actually have many sessions of deep dives covering many different topics in a single video. Unfortunately, due to how the nature of the deep dives work, I can't necessarily merge them together in the sense of like making it to where they would all continuously move on to the next subject to the next continuously. But what I can do using manipulation is have the deep dives covering every different topic before starting an entirely new one by having the audio files, condensed within the frameworks of a single video. So I hope you guys like it, and definitely leave a like or comment below. Later.
Welcome to this custom deep dive for you today. When a digital creator is caught in a scandal, we usually expect digital fireworks, like a tearful apology video or an angry counterattack.
Right, or the classic Notes app screenshot on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. But today we are digging into that stack of notes you sent us and focusing on this really fascinating observation report dated April 30, 2026. It details the strategic retreat of a creator named Lanae Stacks.
Because, what happens when an online figure faces that intense escalating criticism? They don't always fight back. Sometimes they carefully engineer their own disappearance.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking at the data you provided, Stacks hasn't uploaded a single video in 21 days, which... my first thought is, wait, I'm confused.
It seems like career suicide, right?
Yeah. If she stops posting videos, doesn't she lose her main revenue stream? How is killing her own views a survival strategy?
Well, it seems completely counterintuitive, but it's actually a defensive maneuver known as engagement suppression. By halting her videos entirely, she actively starves her critics.
Oh, because the reaction channels have nothing to talk about.
Precisely. They rely entirely on fresh material from her to critique. So by stopping the videos, she completely cuts off their supply chain.
But wait, if you just ghost the platform, doesn't the algorithm punish you and just bury your channel entirely?
That is where her specific tactic comes into play. She isn't doing a complete deletion of her account. Instead, she has shifted to a post-only strategy, strictly using her community tabs.
Just like text posts and polls and stuff?
Yeah. The mechanics behind it are that YouTube's algorithm treats community tab engagement totally differently than video watch time. Text posts simply ping the feeds of her highly engaged core subscribers.
So she stays out of the broader recommendations.
Right. It keeps the channel alive in the back-end system without risking the broader homepage recommendations that would expose her to those critics again. She sacrifices broad view counts to maintain a safe, insulated core.
Wow. So it's basically like a submarine running on silent. It shuts off its active sonar, the videos, because emitting those signals reveals its exact location to enemy destroyers hovering above.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah, and the community posts are essentially just internal comms to keep the crew from panicking while they wait out the depth charges.
And just like running on silent, this is a highly conscious trade-off. Creators can defensively weaponize a platform's underlying mechanics to basically hide in plain sight. She's manipulating the algorithm to quietly weather the storm.
Right, she is intentionally dropping off the radar to ensure the long-term survival of the vessel. But, diving that submarine deep has an immediate human cost. It leaves previous allies stranded on the surface.
It really does. And according to your observation report, the immediate casualty of that is Marianne Lorient.
Right, because Stacks had previously been an incredibly vocal defender of Lorient, specifically regarding a fake check controversy and claims about an active FBI investigation.
Yeah, and both of those claims have now been completely debunked.
Completely debunked. And looking at this report, Stacks didn't even put out a statement distancing herself from Lorient's debunked FBI claims. She just vanished.
She completely stopped providing a platform for Lorient's defense.
Which leaves Lorient to fend for herself against the fallout alone. I mean, does this immediate distancing prove that in the creator economy, individual channel survival will always trump personal loyalty?
What's fascinating here is that the silence actually is the statement. Stacks doesn't have to risk a messy public denouncement or draw fresh attention to the debunked claims.
Oh, so radio silence does all the heavy lifting.
Exactly. It acts as a deliberate severance of what she clearly now views as a liability. It's a really ruthless prioritization of her own digital footprint.
Well, with alliances severed and the channel locked in this ultra-defensive posture, we have to look at the end game here, because creators don't usually walk away from their core audience forever.
No, they don't. The report provides a very strong forecast that this is merely a repositioning period. History shows us that creators who prioritize their support base during a crisis rarely stay dormant.
So you, as the listener, should definitely expect a resurgence. The report suggests keeping an eye out for test uploads or maybe subtle shifts in the tone of her community posts.
Yeah, those are essentially the periscope finally breaking the surface. The operational timing and what her new niche will be when she returns remain uncertain. But a return is inevitable.
Which leaves you with this parting thought to mull over. If a creator can successfully dodge accountability simply by manipulating their engagement metrics and abandoning their allies until the public forgets, does the digital court of public opinion actually have a memory?
Or just a very short attention span.
Exactly. We will just have to see what happens when the submarine finally decides to surface.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're looking at a stack of sources for you. We've got an April 2026 status report, some public records, and social media tracking.
Right, and it's all detailing the decade-long saga of Dr. Umar Johnson's Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, or the FDMG Academy in Wilmington, Delaware.
Yeah, exactly. Analyzing this is honestly a lot like looking at a fully restored historic home online. The photos look incredible.
Oh, absolutely. Listed as totally move-in ready.
Right, but then you actually drive by the neighborhood and you see peeling paint and broken windows. So you're forced to ask, wait, what is really going on inside?
Exactly.
Because back in February 2026, Dr. Johnson claimed the physical renovations were officially done. He said the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical were fully functional and just, waiting for a final city inspection.
Well, this is where the paperwork actually becomes way more important than the plumbing.
Right, because of the occupancy stuff.
Yeah, without a certificate of occupancy, which is, the ultimate legal green light proving a building is structurally safe for human beings to be inside, the physical status is basically irrelevant.
Oh, wow.
So because we lack that hard bureaucratic proof, the mystery sort of shifts entirely from the physical construction to the intense controversies surrounding why those doors actually remain closed.
Okay, so if the building is supposedly humming along but lacks the legal paperwork to open, who is actually keeping the doors closed? Because, according to Dr. Johnson, it's the city. He declared a quote-unquote state of emergency.
Yeah, looking at the documents objectively, the narrative really splits sharply right here. Dr. Johnson claims systemic sabotage, accusing the city of Wilmington of deliberately stalling permits.
Stalling permits, like on purpose.
That's the claim, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He points to a notice that was posted publicly on the school's door in late 2025. And this notice detailed over $76,000 in unpaid property fees and utilities.
Wait, $76,000 taped to the door?
Exactly. And he views the city bypassing standard mail to post this on the door as a form of public shaming and legal warfare.
Right.
He also firmly refuses any charter funds or government grants, arguing that those come with strings attached that would, compromise his Afrocentric curriculum.
Well, I understand wanting to protect the curriculum, but here's where the mechanics of the finances just don't add up for me.
Yeah, it's a huge sticking point.
Right, because it's not just that there's a $76,000 bill. The underlying mechanism here is this glaring discrepancy. Like, how does an organization that has crowdfunded millions of dollars end up with unpaid basic utility notices taped to the front door?
It is definitely a massive question for the people following this.
Especially when he claimed his bank accounts were frozen due to hacking attempts by shadowy forces, which prompted him to ask for donations through non-traditional platforms like Cash App.
Yeah, the Cash App pivot was really controversial.
Right. If your standard accounts are supposedly compromised, demanding Cash App donations without offering any public audit just seems like a massive red flag. How do you demand strict accountability from the city, but offer zero financial transparency to your own donors?
And that financial opacity is the exact wedge fracturing his audience right now.
Wow. So people are finally splitting on this.
Oh, definitely. The public, specifically the conscious community, which is a broad network of pro-Black and Pan-African activists, is splitting into two very distinct camps.
Okay. What are the camps?
So on one side, His loyal base views these ongoing delays and financial hurdles as absolute proof of systemic pushback against Black independent education.
Right, so they're doubling down.
Exactly. To them, these donations aren't just paying for drywall. They are war funds against white supremacy.
Yeah.
So questioning the timeline is viewed as siding with the enemy.
But then you have this massive wave of public skepticism from former supporters who are hitting what the report calls the 10-year wall. And there is a real, psychological shift that happens at the decade mark.
Yeah, 10 years is a breaking point for donor psychology. I mean, people who started giving in 2014 are looking back at millions raised and realizing there is still no clear start date, no defined curriculum, and zero hired teaching staff.
That is wild to think about, a decade of waiting.
Right. The donation fatigue is so severe, it has actually birthed entire accountability channels on TikTok and YouTube just to track the timeline and demand answers.
It really feels like the ultimate shift from hopeful investment to skeptical observation. For you listening, it's like crowdfunding a tech startup for a decade.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. At first, you're buying into the vision, the disruption.
Yeah.
But 10 years later, you're finally saying, hey, I am not sending you another dime until you actually ship a working prototype.
Yep.
Or in this case, until a child is actually sitting in a classroom.
And the tipping point for that tech startup analogy is the pending city inspection and the legal resolution of those property fees. For this community, ideological promises just don't work anymore.
Right. They need tangible proof.
Exactly. The certificate of occupancy has become the only acceptable proof of life for the entire project. The movement is effectively stalled in this stalemate, waiting to see if the bureaucratic reality will ever match the promised vision.
Which makes this such a fascinating case study in the universal tension between grassroots ideological loyalty and hard operational accountability. You want to support a mission, but at some point, the math and the mechanisms really have to make sense.
They do. You can't just run on vision forever.
Exactly. Which leaves us with this to mull over as we wrap up. When an independently funded project relies entirely on the narrative of an external enemy to explain its delays, what happens when they finally get the keys?
That is the real question.
Right. If the door is open and the enemy is gone, the only thing left to face is your own operational competence. Imagine spending millions to launch this revolutionary new academy, only to discover that because of a mundane, unpaid city fee, every single parent who drops their kid off on opening day is technically breaking the law.
Yeah. It sounds crazy, but that is exactly what we're looking at today.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for you today in this deep dive is going through a legal advisory from April 30, 2026. It details the really severe regulatory barriers facing the FDMG Academy over in Wilmington, Delaware. And opening a school isn't just about buying a building and writing up a curriculum. It is like trying to fly a commercial jet, you know? You need clearance from every single control tower before takeoff.
I really like that jet analogy because it captures the sheer scale of the situation perfectly. I mean, this advisory maps out a massive web of local, state, and federal laws.
Right.
And these aren't just, annoying bureaucratic hoops. They are fundamental safety nets designed to protect children. And right now, FDMG Academy is basically sitting on the runway with no clearance to even turn the engines on.
Exactly. And the first control tower keeping them grounded is the city of Wilmington itself. Because before a single student even walks through the doors, the state actually has to acknowledge the institution exists.
Right, which they don't yet.
Yeah, the property actually lacks a city business license because it has outstanding financial liens for unpaid vacant property registration fees.
And municipalities use those business licenses as leverage.
Mm.
If an entity owes the city money for a vacant property lien, the city just freezes their ability to get a license.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a total bureaucratic chokehold. You cannot legally operate a business, much less a whole school, until your local debts are completely cleared up.
Wait, let me challenge that for a second. We see independent, grassroots co-ops and microschools popping up all the time. Why can't FDMG just call themselves a private educational club and bypass the Delaware Department of Education entirely? I mean, what actually happens to the parents who drop their kids off on day one? Are they accidentally breaking the law?
Short answer, yes. Because of compulsory attendance laws, a state has to formally acknowledge an institution legally exists as a school.
Okay, that makes sense.
Under Delaware Code Title 14, Section 2704, non-public schools must register with the Department of Education. But without a business license and proper building checks, the state literally cannot issue what is called an acknowledgement letter.
So the parents are on the hook.
Exactly. If a parent pulls their kid from a public school to send them to an unregistered facility, the state just considers that student legally truant.
Man, so parents trying to get their kids an alternative education are accidentally breaking the law on day one. But while the missing paperwork is an administrative hurdle, the physical building itself presents immediate dangers, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Ah.
The state won't recognize a school that doesn't have a certificate of occupancy specifically designated for educational use.
Which FDMG does not have. And if you're a parent listening to this, you might assume, well, any large building is automatically safe for kids. But the advisory points out that FDMG fails basic life safety codes.
Yeah, we are talking about standards like NFPA 101. That means the state hasn't verified if the building has enough fire exits or proper fire marshal approvals for school density crowds.
Yikes.
Or even a sprinkler system capable of protecting hundreds of children. And they also lack verified plumbing and HVAC inspections and totally fall short on ADA compliance for wheelchair accessibility.
But the risks don't just stop at the physical walls either. There is also the digital infrastructure. The advisory notes a lack of compliance with federal FERPA laws.
Right, the law that keeps a student's medical and academic records from falling into the wrong hands. Because if an institution cannot legally protect a student's data, or, physically protect them in a fire, the federal government will not recognize their authority to educate.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because of those missing accreditations, any diplomas FDMG issues wouldn't be recognized for federal financial aid, like the IFSA or by the military for enlistment.
Yeah, which is a huge deal for these kids' futures.
Handing out these unrecognized diplomas is like giving kids winning lottery tickets that legally cannot be cashed. They look incredibly official, but the moment they try to use it to cross a border into college or the military, they just get stopped in their tracks.
What's fascinating here is that trying to operate outside this system carries severe penalties.
Like what kind of penalties?
Well, opening without these approvals triggers immediate cease and desist orders from the city of Wilmington. Plus, it exposes the operators to criminal charges for endangering the welfare of minors and civil liability from parents for fraudulent misrepresentation.
Wow, okay, so why does all this matter to you? I mean, it is a masterclass in the unseen regulatory scaffolding required to guarantee student safety and ensure an education actually counts.
It really is.
For parents, it's a stark warning. Enrolling kids in unauthorized facilities risks Child Protective Services stepping in for educational neglect.
Because as far as the state is concerned, they don't recognize the child as being schooled at all. And when a high-profile alternative education project is completely halted by things like vacant property fees and HVAC inspections, it forces a really important conversation.
Yeah, it leaves you with a serious question to ponder. How do we balance the societal desire for independent, grassroots educational models with the rigid, unforgiving realities of state safety frameworks? Like, if you want to change the way we travel, is there ever a safe way to skip the control tower?
If I told you that a Caltech engineer and teacher of the month boarded a cross-country train to assassinate the president, well, you'd probably tell me to write a better movie script.
Right. It sounds completely made up.
It really does. I mean, you've probably seen the headlines about the April 25th Hilton checkpoint attack. But today, we're doing a deep dive into the newly released FBI affidavit.
Yeah, we really want to cut through the noise here.
Exactly. The mission is to look strictly at the mechanics of what happened, the just baffling profile of suspect Cole Thomas Allen, and today's legal updates. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, let's start with the sheer physics of how this attack was actually thwarted.
Oh, the cell phone thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because the fact that a U.S. Secret Service officer survived a 12-gauge shotgun blast to the chest at 8:40 p.m. isn't just luck. It's really about how kinetic energy is dispersed.
Right. I was reading about that. I mean, a ballistic vest stunts the actual penetration of the pellets, but the blunt force trauma from a shotgun at close range, that can still shatter ribs or even stop a heart, right?
Precisely. The vest catches the projectiles, but that kinetic energy, well, it still has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And in this case, the officer had a cell phone in his pocket right over his chest. So that phone acted as a dense, rigid backstop.
Wow.
Yeah, it absorbed and distributed that localized shock just enough to prevent fatal internal trauma. It's a fascinating, unintended layer of defense.
Which is incredible, honestly. But the arsenal he brought, I mean, the shotgun, the .38 caliber pistol, the knives, That's not even the most unsettling part to me.
Right, the timeline.
Exactly. The timeline is wild.
What's fascinating here is the methodical premeditation. I mean, this wasn't some sudden heat-of-the-moment mental break.
No, not at all.
Allen booked his room at the Hilton back on April 6th. He rode a train all the way from Los Angeles to D.C.
Just sitting on a train for days.
Right. And just minutes before rushing that checkpoint, he emailed his family and a former employer. In that email, he actually signed off as a friendly federal assassin.
I'm really struggling to square this circle, Like, why would someone call themselves a friendly assassin?
It's a jarring contradiction, for sure.
Yeah, you don't just wake up one morning, walk away from being a celebrated part-time tutor, and decide to become an armed assassin. I mean, he's a 31-year-old Caltech mechanical engineering grad.
And a recently awarded Teacher of the Month, too.
Right. So what does this all mean? How does a celebrated tutor end up carrying out a violent attack? Like, was there a trigger event, or did the FBI find that this was a slow burn?
Well, the affidavit points to a very slow internal burn. Investigators found a detailed manifesto in his hotel room and on his devices.
Okay.
And looking strictly at the FBI's findings, and we need to set aside the actual politics of it because we're just analyzing his stated motives here, not endorsing them.
Oh, absolutely, just reporting the facts.
Right. His writings reveal a deep, escalating hostility toward President Trump. He somehow convinced himself that extreme violence was actually a public service.
That level of cognitive dissonance is just staggering. It reminds me of structural fatigue in metal.
Well, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, from the outside, the beams look completely solid, holding up everyday life. But internally, there are, like, microfractures forming until the exact moment it snaps under pressure.
That's a perfect analogy because radicalization today often doesn't look like someone shouting on a street corner.
Right, it's quieter.
Exactly. It can happen to highly educated individuals who retreat into ideological echo chambers. They use their intellect to rationalize the irrational.
Building an entire logical framework that justifies violence. But wait, if he was this methodical planning for weeks, traveling across the country, how did they actually capture him alive in the middle of an armed breach?
Well, he literally tripped.
Wait, you're kidding?
No, seriously. During the chaotic chase after the initial shots, Allen just tripped and fell.
Wow.
Yeah, that momentary loss of footing gave law enforcement the split second they needed to tackle him. He walked away with only a minor knee injury.
Which brings us to his current legal reality, because he survived, and now we're watching a massive DOJ prosecution unfold.
Right.
He's facing attempted assassination of the president, plus major firearms charges. He faces up to life in prison.
And the legal gears are moving incredibly fast. Today, Thursday, April 30, 2026, is his critical detention hearing.
To determine if he gets bail.
Exactly. The federal magistrate judge has held him without bonds so far, but today determines if he stays locked up pending a formal grand jury indictment.
This whole event forces you to really look at the terrifying intersection of high-profile security and extreme political polarization.
It really does. It shows how vulnerable the system is.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with this final thought. Cole Thomas Allen genuinely believed he was a friendly federal assassin.
Which is just such a wild phrase.
Right. How does a highly educated engineer rationalize violent assassination as a friendly act to the country?
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. And what does that extreme cognitive dissonance reveal about how modern radicalization hides in plain sight? Just something for you to mull over as this investigation continues to unfold.
Welcome to today's deep dive, where, we're looking at something pretty interesting. You ever walk through a casino and just, watch people at the slot machines?
Oh, yeah, totally glassy-eyed.
Right, exactly. Just pulling the lever over and over, detached, just desperately waiting for those cherries to line up. Well, that trance isn't just a Vegas thing anymore. It's actually happening to digital creators right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're unpacking today with the Authentic Commentators Manifesto. We're diving into why this modern YouTube gold rush, the luxury cars, the massive sponsorships.
The constant hustle.
Right, why all of that is actually a massive trap.
I mean, the core conflict the source sets up is really about how you treat the platform. Is it a megaphone for your truth or, like we said, a slot machine for your ego?
And, if you choose the slot machine route, you're basically forced to play by the algorithm's rules, which triggers what the manifesto calls creative erosion.
Wait, creative erosion? You just slowly lose yourself?
Exactly. I mean, it's not usually this conscious decision to just wake up and make clickbait. It's this subconscious, psychological mechanism. Like, you notice a video with a slightly more outraged tone gets, say, 10% more views.
So next time you just fake a little bit more outrage to chase that bump.
Right. And then you fast forward 2 years, and you don't even recognize the persona you're playing.
Yeah.
Your authentic voice gets completely erased.
But I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who creates content. I mean, if you just completely ignore the algorithm and the meta, aren't you basically whispering into a void? Like, how do you survive if only, I don't know, 50 people ever see your video?
Well, you survive by recognizing this really hard line the text draws between a following and a community.
Okay, so what's the big difference there?
A following is just people watching for the spectacle. They're just there for the hype. But a community, that's a support system built on shared values.
Oh, I see. So if you're just chasing a massive following, you're tying your self-worth to this exhausting treadmill.
Exactly. And every single video that underperforms feels like this crushing personal failure, which frankly leaves you incredibly vulnerable to outrage culture.
Because you constantly need to top your last performance to keep the spectacle going.
Yeah, you have to up the ante every single time.
Right, whereas the alternative is becoming what the source calls bully-proof. Because if your goal is just to express a genuine idea to a community, well, 50 views is exactly as successful as 50,000.
As long as it hits the right people, yeah.
Exactly. Those 50 people will stick with you through technical difficulties or life changes or whatever. You don't need to fill a stadium.
And, stepping off that stadium treadmill, that's what actually frees up the energy you need to master the craft of commentary.
Right, because the slot machine mentality pushes you toward these low-effort shortcuts, reaction content or whatever, because you're solely optimizing for the payout.
Yeah, but authentic creation demands real skills. Researching, writing, editing, public speaking.
Which makes a lot of sense. You're basically building a real-world digital resume of hard skills instead of just successfully gaming a math equation that, let's be honest, might not even exist next year.
Exactly. You develop a very real set of production and critical thinking abilities that stay with you forever. That's the long game here. I mean, the early days of digital content weren't defined by the richest creators.
No, they were defined by people who actually had something to say, which really brings up a therapeutic angle from the text. Like, for you listening, looking back in 10 years, would you rather have a digital record of how you navigated life's transitions and honed your voice, or just a fat bank account that came at the cost of your soul?
Well, when you put it like that, the choice seems pretty obvious.
It really does. So the ultimate takeaway here is just to speak because the world is missing your perspective. If fame and money come, they have to be a byproduct of your passion.
Never the purpose. Because the digital landscape is just too volatile to base your entire identity on metrics.
Exactly. So we're going to leave you with this to mull over. If the platforms you use completely disappeared tomorrow, would the digital content you've spent years creating or even just consuming leave you with lasting real-world skills and a resilient community?
Or would it just be an empty digital footprint?
It's a tough question. So next time you log on, just ask yourself, are you stepping up to a megaphone or just pulling another lever?
Okay, guys, I think that'll do it as far as the overviews. We covered a lot of topics. We had a lot of fun. I hope to see you guys again. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. But most importantly, definitely leave a comment. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Please. I will even be happy if you don't like it, just if you leave a comment. That is the one thing that I will always be looking forward to the most, a comment. I want to hear what the public has to say.